Hi everyone, it's Monica and welcome back to Taylor-Made Cards for You. Well, today I'm going to show you how to put together a very easy Christmas card. And this is a Christmas card that you can put together last minute. By now, many of us have already finished creating our Christmas cards and we've actually got them in the mail. And I'm one of those crafters. For the most part, most of my Christmas stash has gone into my storage container and I'm getting ready to put it away for the year. But sometimes I run into a situation where I need a last minute Christmas card. And that was my situation a couple of days ago. So I decided, since I was going to go ahead and put together a couple of last minute Christmas cards, I would go ahead and tape it and show you how easy it is to throw a card together in no time at all. So that's what we're doing tonight. So let's get started. So the stash that I'm going to be working with tonight is stuff that I haven't put away yet. It was just actually sitting on my desk. These snowflakes I picked up at Hobby Lobby, and they're just the plastic snowflakes that you'll find in a little bag. And as you can see, they come in a variety of sizes. I also had this snowflake die from Life's Craft sitting on my desk. This company had sent me a couple of dies to try out, and I just hadn't had a chance to use it yet, so I thought this was the perfect opportunity. Now they also sent me a second die, and I'm not sure if this was on accident, but I'm going to go ahead and take advantage of the situation, and I'm going to be giving away my second die to one of the commenters. So I'm going to give you more information on how you can win this die at the end of the video, so make sure you stick around. So to put this card together, you're going to need some white cardstock because we're going to be cutting out the white snowflakes with some white cardstock. You're going to need some type of a snowflake. So I'm using these plastic snowflakes, but I think you could probably get away with a snowflake stamp or even perhaps some snowflake stencils. But if you get into the whole stencil background, you're going to have to pull out more of your stash. You're going to have to pull out your palette knife, probably some sort of texture paste, and maybe even some color. So if you want to keep it simple, I would recommend either a stamp, maybe some stickers, or these plastic snowflakes like I'm using here. Now, like I said, I'm keeping it simple, so I'm not going to be coloring up any backgrounds. I'm actually going to be using some cardstock. And the cardstock I decided to use was from an old paper pack that I've had in my stash. And I decided to flip through it and find some backgrounds that actually had snowflakes already on them. I wanted them to go ahead and complement the die and the snowflakes, so I thought having a background that already had snowflakes on it would be perfect. And since I have so many snowflakes, I figured I would go ahead and cut out several cardstock pieces so I could put together several cards, and that way I could truly put away my Christmas stash for the season. Now for a sentiment, I wanted to go ahead and stamp it onto a fancy label, so I went ahead and I cut this out with that white cardstock, and I'm going to go ahead and stamp the sentiment on it. So really the only thing I'm going to need for ink is some black ink and a sentiment. So I cut out several of these labels because I figured since I already had the label out, I would go ahead and cut them out, and even if I have extra, I'll just put them in my stash for next year. And then I'm going to go ahead and use this Merry Christmas sentiment stamp from Hero Arts. Now this stamp set is an older one, and it's the Christmas tree layering, but it's still a classic and it's perfect for many of your Christmas cards. But we're not going to be doing that today. Now for my sentiment, I'm using my Misty, but you don't even need to pull out the Misty for this situation. You can easily pull out one of your acrylic blocks and make sure you just have enough black ink on your acrylic stamp to go ahead and stamp your sentiment. But I went ahead and pulled out my Misty and I decided to go ahead and stamp several of my sentiments. Now the black ink that I'm using is the Memento ink. But really, you can use any black ink. We're not doing anything fancy. All we're doing is stamping the sentiment. And the sentiment that I actually chose to use said, "Let it snow." I think I was looking at the Merry Christmas one initially, but since we were going for a snow-themed card, I decided to use the "Let it snow" stamp sentiment. Alright, so for these cards, I ended up gluing the designer cardstock to my black cardstock first. But I think if I were to do this again, I probably would add my snowflake die first, because the snowflake die ended up being a little bit larger than my 5-inch tall card. and it was easier to trim when I hadn't layered it onto the black cardstock. So if you don't want to have to fuss with that, what I would recommend is add your snowflake first and then mat it onto the black cardstock. Now you don't even need to go with the black cardstock. Like I said, we're going to keep it simple, but I have extra black cardstock, so I went ahead and decided to mat it up. But if you wanted to, you could simply just cut out your designer paper and add your snowflake and add that to the base of the card. Like I said, guys, we're keeping it simple. And I did this with several of the cards. So I just added them to the card base. I added the snowflakes to the left-hand side, and then I was ready to add my snowflakes. Now initially when I was adding the snowflake die, I thought I was going to need to put my sentiment and figure out exactly where my snowflakes needed to be, but you don't even need to get that fancy. All you need to do is just put your snowflakes down, glue it down, and then add your sentiment, and then just work your snowflakes in around it. So just let the snowflakes be the last item that you add, so that way you can add them to your cardstock to just make it look cohesive. Now as far as the adhesive for the snowflake die, some of these pieces are pretty thin, as you can see. So if you're going to be using some sort of liquid glue, you may want to pull out the liquid glue that has a very fine tip. A lot of us may just decide to add the glue to the base, which is what I'm doing here, and let part of the snowflake, which are the snowflakes, just kind of be loose. And that's fine as well. But you might run into a situation where if the snowflakes are loose, they may get caught on things like an envelope, or maybe when you're pulling them out, and it might actually tear the snowflake. So if you want to, if you're concerned about that, or if you want to glue them down, then I would just glue down the middle portion of the snowflake, and that way at least it's going to be a little bit sturdier. Now here's where I said you're going to have some of that snowflake come off of the edge. So I went ahead and I just trimmed it up so that way it was aligned with the designer cardstock. So once I had all of the snowflakes glued down, the design was almost finished. All I needed to do was add my sentiment, add my snowflakes, and then just add it to a card base, and I was good to go. So I went ahead and I put together several of these cards, kind of like in an assembly line. So when I got to the point where I just needed to add the sentiment, they would go together pretty quickly. Most of the time that even took to put these cards together was doing the die cutting. But as you can see, I did that ahead of time. So when I sat down to put the cards together, it went together pretty quickly. Now for the sentiment, like I said, I did use some of those round foam dots, but you don't even have to use foam dots if you don't want to. I just thought because those snowflakes were a little bit more chunky because they are made out of plastic, that I wanted my sentiment to stand up a little bit, and that's why I chose to use the foam dots. But if I was going to stamp my snowflakes, I may just add the sentiment straight to the card without having popping it up. But again, that's entirely up to you. And then once you have your sentiment added, then it's just a matter of adding the decorative snowflakes. So for my snowflakes, I ended up just getting some of my glue, adding it to the back of my snowflake, and adding it right onto the card. And then once those were dry, then I added them to my white card base. So as you can see, these cards came together really easily, and they're pretty cute. All right, so let's talk about the giveaway. Like I said, I have an extra one of the snowflake dies, so I want to go ahead and give it to one of my listeners. And so what I'll do is, if you could leave me a comment, let me know if you've completed all of your Christmas cards or if you're still making Christmas cards. I know many of us make Christmas cards all the way up to December 25th. But like I said, I'm not one of those crafters, but you might be. So let me know. Are you one of those crafters that will craft and make Christmas cards all the way up to Christmas Day? Or do you stop at a certain point in the month? And if you do, let me know when is about the time that you decide to put it away. All right. So as always, I'll leave a list of all of the products that I use to create these cards, along with the list to the stores. And if you've enjoyed my video, I would sure appreciate a thumbs up. I'm getting to the end of the point where I'm not going to be making any more Christmas cards because, like I said, I'm putting my Christmas stash away. But if I do end up making another Christmas card, it probably will be another quick and easy one. And while I love crafting, I get to a point where I've just made enough Christmas cards that it's time to put it away. And usually about this time of December is when I start to get my baking going. So while I might not be creating in my craft room, I'll certainly be creating in my kitchen. All right, everybody, I hope you all have a wonderful evening and a wonderful holiday, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks for stopping by.